What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bourbon of the Week. My name's Chris. I'm going to be your host for today, and today we have some Pennsylvania Rye whiskey for you. Now, Kentucky can keep the bourbon. Obviously, the Kentucky Bourbon Trail is big. Everybody loves Kentucky bourbon, but Pennsylvania Rye is bringing back the Pennsylvania Rye Trail here eventually. I hope they do it sooner rather than later, but this is Liberty Pole Spirits. Whenever you ask people about the best whiskey coming out of Pennsylvania, Liberty Pole is almost always at the forefront. They have some great whiskey. Check out their core products, and this is old Monongahela. I've been practicing that all morning. Monongahela Pennsylvania Rye whiskey. We're going to pour this up. We're going to put it through price, taste, drinkability, and tell you a little bit more about the Monongahela Valley. I don't think you realize how many times I've said Monongahela, and we're going to keep a counter here on today's video. One, I just love saying the word, and two, we're going to talk about it a lot today. We don't need a lot of this. This is coming at 108 proof. You know the rules: price, taste, drinkability. But before we get started on all of that, time for the traditional sip. Cheers, y'all. I mean, that's different. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, whiskey coming out of Pennsylvania, and it's gotta be rye whiskey. Pennsylvania straight rye whiskey, old Monongahela foolproof rye whiskey coming in at 108 proof. They got a great story here that we're gonna talk about during the Bourbon Bomb of the Week, but let's go through it. Price, taste, drinkability starting at 108 proof. How well does this sip compared to the proof? Now, I gotta tell you, I sipped a lot of this because this is the type of whiskey that if you're sitting there and you're looking for a traditional rye whiskey, don't look towards this. If you're looking for a traditional bourbon drinkers rye, you know, a lot of people like myself enjoy some rye, but they really want those bourbon flavors to go along with it, don't look towards this. I gotta tell you, this is something more unique than anything that I've had before, and it took me a while, just like when I started drinking bourbons, which I fell in love with. It takes you a while to kind of acclimate to the flavor profile. You gotta get used to that burn. You gotta get used to that whiskey profile over something like rum, which is what I drank before. So it took me a while to acclimate towards whiskey, and it took me a little bit to acclimate towards this. I didn't know if I loved the taste at first, but we'll talk about that a little bit more during taste. But I will tell you, this is something different. This is something unique that I think you've ever tried before. But let's start with 108 proof. How does this drink compare to its proof? I mean, right off the bat, I'm impressed. This isn't anything in the 120s, 130s, so I don't expect a lot of ethanol kick behind it. But at 108 proof, I still expect it to have a little bit of burn, especially when we're talking about the quantity of rye that we're talking about in this, which I will get to here shortly when we talk about taste. I gotta say, at 108 proof, this drink's very easy. First glass of whiskey for the night, nothing overwhelming, doesn't give you that, I'll call it a Pennsylvania hug, doesn't give you anything like that. This is foolproof, so it goes into the barrel at 108 proof. They do tell us it goes up a little bit in proof, and then they do add a little bit of water to bring it back down to that 108 proof, but we give it a 7.0 if it drinks right at its proof. Let me take one more sip and see what I would blind this at if I didn't know it was 108 proof. So if I took away the fact that I knew this was 108 proof, but kept the fact that I knew this was 74% rye, there's two ryes in this, we'll talk about that more in a minute, I would think this would drink a lot hotter than it does. I don't know if they're blending this out because it can't be blended out too much because there's only 8 barrels blended into this particular release. There's so much to go over when we talk about this particular glass. 108 proof, very easy to drink. I would say it's maybe 95 to 100 proof, so we're talking 8 proof points all the way up to 13 proof points difference. That's crazy, especially for a Pennsylvania whiskey that's this young. This is 3.5 to about 5 years old when it comes to these blends. This is just, it's blowing my mind, to be quite honest with you. 108 proof, last sip, will give you a score. We give it a 7.0 if it drinks right at its proof. I'm going 8s, easy. I think mid-8s is about where it should be. I don't think it should be quite at an 8.5 because it is only 108 proof, but let's go like 8.47 when it comes to drinkability on this. I could absolutely crush this. Crushable scale, this is towards the top. 8.47 is where we're going to put this when it comes to drinkability. Let's get a taste, and we've got a lot to go over with that. Up next, we're going to get a taste on this, and I would normally say real quick, and I'll speak as fast as I can, but we have a lot to get to when it comes to this particular glass and when it comes to taste on this. This is more unique and more different than anything that I've ever tried. So let's talk about Liberty Pole Spirits. First of all, they're out of Washington, Pennsylvania. They're an 8-year-old company, which means they don't have that much older whiskey, but 3.5 to 5-year-old whiskey for this particular Monongahela release is not too bad at all. I will say the mash bill on this, before we get into that, is 61% Pennsylvania rye, then it's 13% malted rye, 13% wheat, and 13% malted barley. So that's a 4-grain mash bill. All of that double pot stilled on this, and then it's also foolproof. So again, they're watering it back down to that 108 proof. All the things going into this glass makes it particularly unique, let alone the Monongahela, which we're going to talk about during our Bourbon Bomb of the Week. First things first, I want to tell you all the reasons I shouldn't love this bottle. So when I tell you all the reasons that I do, it's going to impress you even more. Number one, it's pot still, and not just once, but twice. I didn't used to love pot stilled whiskey. When I drank this, I knew immediately that it was pot still. I don't know if I knew it was double pot still, but at the end of the day, I knew it was pot still because I just get that flavor profile. Again, it's something that you can pick up on. When you drink enough pot still whiskey, it definitely stands out. I wasn't supposed to like that. Number two, it's 3.5 to 5 years old. That's younger in the rye whiskey world, but it's not too young when it comes to Pennsylvania rye whiskey. There's not a lot of Pennsylvania rye whiskeys that are much older than that. Pennsylvania rye whiskey is definitely making a comeback, but it's still in the early stages. I shouldn't love that. And number three, a 4-grain rye drinker's rye mash bill shouldn't be for me, but somehow yet again with just 8 barrels in this particular blend, they made it work. Let me take one more sip and then we'll talk about the flavor profiles that I get on this. So the flavor profile on this, it starts out very herbal, and I can only equate it to what I would imagine it would be like if you brewed your own tea with like actual tea leaves. I've never done it myself. I use Lipton tea with a little bit of 2% milk and some sugar, but that's what I would imagine that flavor profile would bring me if I made tea with actual tea leaves. Second, you get a lot of sweetness on this that I was not expecting because of that 74% rye. The char, the oak at 3.5 to 5 years old, you still get a pretty good oak presence on this, but it's a very sweet oak presence, which I absolutely love. The double pot still flavor definitely shines through on this, but then you get that spiciness, you get that evergreen note from that high rye content, and all of this blended so well together at 8 barrels. I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, but this is the second release, so this is 8 barrels. The first release, I believe, was 6 barrels. This glass, I don't know how they did it, but they made everything I'm not supposed to like work, and it works in this particular glass. It's crazy to me because this is like the perfect transition for me from that hot 108-degree summer day, no pun intended, with the 108 proof, to that it's not quite cold yet. Like, I don't know if I would drink this by a campfire, but on a crisp fall afternoon or a crisp fall evening, I could definitely see myself sitting down, jeans on, sweatshirt on, smoking a cigar, drinking this. There's almost like a, now that I say cigar, there's like a smokiness to this, a little bit of a tobacco influence, maybe a leather influence. Again, all that happening at 3.5 to 5 years old. This glass, while unique, while something I'm not supposed to like, is definitely something that I can enjoy almost any time, but definitely this time of the year. Listen, I've been trying to avoid pouring up 2 glasses in one review just because I'm trying to put out more content, and to do that, you've got to do more content in one night. So the more glasses you have, obviously, the less content you can produce. But this one definitely deserves a second pour. I got to tell you, it deserves the score I'm about to give it when it comes to taste as well. The thing that truly shines on this is this stands out in a world of whiskey that seems to be so mundane these days. All the whiskey that I'm drinking, it doesn't taste exactly the same, right? But it's the same thing over and over again. It's just a matter of other flavors more predominant or less predominant. Does Elijah Craig C923 compared to Elijah Craig A124? It's just getting so boring that this is exactly what I needed in my particular collection to set itself apart from everything else in that collection. This bottle, I think it's exceptional. I'm going to go right under a 9. Let's go like 8.78 when it comes to taste on this. Phenomenal glass, and you're not going to hate the price on it either. So I got to tell you, I've been trying a lot of craft whiskey lately, and it seems like every time I pick up a bottle, maybe I enjoy it. Maybe I say, hey, for 2.5 to 3-year-old whiskey, this isn't bad. For 80 proof, it doesn't burn, whatever it happens to be. But then I look at the price tag, and it just doesn't reflect what they're putting in the bottle. I understand a lot of these craft distilleries are smaller, younger distilleries. So when it comes to things, they've got to make money on the front end so they can start to get some money on the books for the back end. This is 3.5 to 5-year-old whiskey. When this is 5 to 7, 7 to 9-year-old whiskey, if they keep going with this particular release, I think they're going to have some phenomenal stuff on their hands that people across the country are going to be talking about. That being said, this bottle comes in at $64. I was expecting at least 80. I was thinking at least 90. 64, I think, is on the tail end of high. I definitely understand that people will be a little bit upset paying $64 for this. I wouldn't be now that I've tried it. I would definitely pay $64. If I lived closer, I would definitely support them at $64 for this particular release because I think it's that good. I reflect that in my drinkability and my taste score. So when it comes to the price on this, I can't be too mad about $64 at all. We all say, what, $10 a year? So if there is 5-year-old whiskey in this, I'm sure it's a lot more of that, closer to that 3.5 than the 5, but still, we're talking $50. They're asking $64. It's not that bad at all. Guys, what is this score going to be when it comes to price? So we give it a 7.0 if it's an average drinkability, average taste at an average price. We say $75 to $90, but I don't think that means this bottle should be $75 to $90. I think we're at the tip top of what they should be charging for this at $64. That being said, that kind of balances each other out, right? We're up here with taste and drinkability. We're down here when it comes to price, right around where it should be. So I'm going to say this will go right above a 7. Let's go like 7.13 when it comes to price on this. Again, I can't be too mad at $64 at all. But listen, while I add these scores up, let's send it over this week's Bourbon Bomb of the Week for a very quick tutorial of how to say Monongahela and talk about that just a little bit, along with Liberty Pole Spirits. So Liberty Pole Spirits actually says they're paying homage to Old Monongahela, which was a rye whiskey that was distilled here in Pennsylvania back between the 1700s and Prohibition. Now, how anybody found this particular release, I don't know. It's obviously not on the Fine Wine and Good Spirits website, but Liberty Pole Spirits knows about it. There wasn't any definition or laws on how you distilled spirits back then, so Old Monongahela today is defined as high rye mash bill, which we have at 74% rye. It had to be distilled in the Monongahela Valley, which they're doing out of Washington, Pennsylvania. It has to be a sweet mash, which is what they do on this particular bottle, and it also had to be pot stilled, which they're obviously doing double pot stilling this. So the history of whiskey is something that's always intrigued me. Kentucky is one thing, but Pennsylvania rye whiskey, being a native Pennsylvania, is something that's always been interesting to me. I believe they are still in the works of bringing back the Pennsylvania Rye Trail. I can't wait until they do it. I think it's going to bring national attention to something as big as the Bourbon Trail is in the years to come. Obviously not right now, but in the years to come, I think it will bring national attention to Pennsylvania Rye because it's really where it's got its start. That being said, Liberty Pole Spirits seems to be on the forefront of this. They're using 53-gallon drums on this. I believe they're from, West Virginia Great Barrel Company, and they're using Appalachian oak. So all of that, again, being local to Pennsylvania, being from the Rye Trail, being a Monongahela story. I just love everything about this particular bottle, and I hope you do as well. If you have an opportunity to find one of these from somebody, from a friend from Pennsylvania, definitely do that. Check out libertypolespirits.com. I'll link them in the description below. I'm not going to lie to you, this bottle absolutely shocks me. This comes in at an 8.13, and look at some of the names that it's beating on this list. I gotta be honest with you. If you try this for the first time, it's going to be tough because I'm going to send some samples out of this just to get some other people's opinions on this, but I don't think one glass does it justice. I think that you really do have to have a couple of glasses of these, maybe even over a couple of nights, which isn't the traditional way that you're supposed to enjoy whiskey. I know a lot of you are going to be like, I don't want to have 4 glasses to realize that I like it, but some things open up over time. Some things change over time. I think this one just needs some time to really acclimate to a palate of somebody that's not used to drinking something like this. That being said, if you have an opportunity to, definitely try this bottle, especially at 64 bucks. I don't think you're really going to break the bank or be too upset even if you don't like it, but I can guarantee you'll at least appreciate what they're putting out at 64 bucks. But listen, I always like to be open and honest. Liberty Pole did send me this bottle, so huge shout out to them. I am definitely going to keep my eye on this particular release going forward. I don't need them to send me any more bottles because I will personally put up the money to make sure I have more of this in my collection. But in the meantime, make sure you click that like and subscribe button if you enjoy this content at all. Check out our Discord and our Patreon, both those linked in the description below. Check us out on Instagram as well. Post a lot of funny content over there. If you're not already, click that follow button over on Instagram. Please don't drink and drive. Always drink responsibly. Stay healthy, stay happy, and stay on the Rye Whiskey Trail. Pennsylvania's bringing it back. Cheers, y'all.